Yesterday.
That's awesome.
Thank you. So I would just message John and said like, hey, if you're still light on speakers, I gave this talk yesterday and would be happy to do it again. Was anybody else there yesterday other than Mike? Sweet. So I put together, I'm starting to do more with notifications in one of my apps, and I put together, as I was going through, I realized that there was a lot of stuff that I just hadn't paid attention to over the years, mostly stuff that came out in iOS 10. So show of hands, who has used local notifications, like in the world? And the new user notifications framework, all that stuff. Cool. Okay, so a lot of this will be reviewed, but I tried to pull out some interesting stuff that I found. Obviously, just a couple benefits, like it's super cheap. Especially if you're an indie person, you might not even have a server that's powering your website. It might just be the app, so this enables you to do interaction in a much easier way. As of iOS 10, you can do all the same stuff you can do with remote notifications, pretty much with local notifications, which is really nice. And also, because it's running on the user's device, you have access to a whole lot of stuff that you don't necessarily have in the user's profile. So it can be really useful, and I'll try to pull out some kind of use cases that are rad. And then if you don't have any connection to a network, it doesn't matter. Like you can schedule them, you can have them fire, basically just completely in airplane mode for months and years and whatever. So if you have some app that is out in the wilderness or something, no problem. Like you can, yeah.
500 miles out to sea.
500 miles out to sea would be perfect. Like for example, you could have an app that tracks dolphins, whales, whatever, and as long as they stay completely still in your stored location of where they were, sharks, right. You could have a thing go off, or like the example that I was using the other day was like if you have a hiking app, for example, and you want to have a beacon go off when it's time to take a nice photograph, you can, if you know where the geocoordinates of those places, you can schedule the notifications and they'll fire when the user goes over the thing.
One of the features of our whale alert app is that it keeps track in the background of the user's location. And if they move into one of these conservation zones, it uses local notification to say, hey, slow down, watch out for whales because those are the regulations for this region.
That's awesome. So how many notifications have you fired at one time? Or have you scheduled at one time?
Just one at a time.
No, but I mean like, so if you have a series of regions like that whales could be in, like have you tried having like hundreds of them or thousands of them?
No, it doesn't. The idea is that users' locations moved into one of them or moved out of
Yeah.
one of them. So
Oh, sure. You get one fired at any one time, but you have all of them scheduled with the system, basically.
we built it out of time.
What?
It's
Or you
on
have,
time.
sorry, the requests.
It's triggered.
Yeah. Anyway, so I feel like most people here know me, but basically, like I've been doing iOS stuff for about 10 years now. First on my own, then in New York at the Times, and then moved back here. That's this tea a few years ago, and I started coming to these nice things. This chilly emoji was for last night. It's less chilly today, but it's still cold. And then the real point of this slide is that for early next year, I'm looking for a little bit of contract work. So if anybody knows anything, let me know. So the local notifications have been around for about as long as I've been doing iOS. So they came out with iOS 4. They were pretty simple at first. You could basically say something, and then you could trigger it at a time interval, basically like a date at that time. And then in iOS 8, I think they added the ability for you to geo-fire these things, or whatever you want to use the word. In iOS 10, they came out with this rad user notifications framework. And then it got updated a little bit in iOS 12, but most of the stuff that I'm going to talk about today is 3 versions old, so you should pretty much be able to use it no matter what. All of my slides come from the movie The Sting. So this is the list of the kinds of things we're going to use. Today I'm going to go through each one, and it's actually a pretty nice, tight little package. I feel like this is actually a pretty well-designed framework. I've been really happy using it. So the user notifications is the framework. Your notification center is the thing in charge, the thing that you send requests to and ask questions about, and that checks back in with you. You need to be authorized to send notifications, kinda, and I'll talk about the reason for the asterisks in a minute. And you are authorized for a certain number of types of things, and I'll talk about which those things are. Things like alerts, badges. And then the content is actually what you are going to say with your notifications. That's kind of the meat about what they are. And then when you are actually scheduling these things, you'll get a mutable version of that. You can have it make different kinds of sounds, and you can trigger it in any number of three ways right now. You can either do it after a certain amount of time. You can do it given a set of date components firing at a certain date, or you can fire at a location. And you bundle all this up and you put it into a notification request. And you can optionally give that request a category, which is a type of notification, which basically allows you to give it a certain number of actions and make it do stuff. Those are the little buttons you get, like snooze on a calendar thing. And then you interact with this, or this thing interacts with you rather, by you setting yourself as the notification center's delegate. So pretty basic. But again, like some of this stuff is going to be, most of this stuff is going to be pretty reviewy. So you get your notification center, you say basically what kinds of things you want to do with your notification, and then you request authorization. And at that point you get this awesome pop-up, which a lot of apps put right on you as soon as you open up the app, which is always an awesome user experience.
Alerts? What?
Sorry?
There was a typo.
Oh, really? I took that off of Google Images. Where is? Oh, yeah. Good eye. Good eye. Allez, allez. That's 2 L's, isn't it? Do not speak French. But so there is actually a way to avoid that badge, kinda. I think it's iOS 12. They have this new option, provisional. And if you use the provisional option, it will automatically grant your initial requests, and you won't actually pop up any alert or anything. You'll just be able to schedule the alerts, or the notifications rather. But they won't actually pop up as alerts, and they won't badge the app. They'll only show up they won't show up on the lock screen. They'll only show up in the notification center. I did not take a photo of it, but it's the swipey downy part.
Is your app still get a callback
If the callback when the user taps on it?
if it goes off? Or is that not?
Well, if the notification, when the notification fires,
Yeah.
you don't get a callback when your notification fires.
Oh, you
No, I don't believe so. I
Because
think. Does
if-
anybody
if
remember?
the app is running when it fires.
Oh, I see. I see. Yes, I don't know the answer to that. Probably.
Well, when your app is running in the background, at least with push notification, you don't know anything until the user taps on that notification band.
Although, isn't there like an option that you can set in your payload? I remember we did it when I was at the Times. Like there was it started out with Newsstand. Sorry.
You have the silent.
Yeah. Back in the Newsstand days, like iOS 5, it was like you set a content available flag in the payload, and then that would wake up the app and let you basically do whatever you wanted for some number of minutes.
Yeah,
But then that's in real apps now too, right?
I thought that if the app was running, you would also have an opportunity to take action. And the reason is because iOS won't show your banner. if
Oh,
the app's
yeah.
running, but it gives you a chance to open your app.
I don't touch on that now, but now you can actually have the same behavior as if it weren't running, but you have to respond to the delegate message in a right way. Has anybody done that in here? But basically, you can have the same behavior as if your app were not running, but you have to want it. So you'll get the delegate message, and then you'll have to respond, I think, to the callback in a certain way to get that default treatment, or you can choose to ignore it, basically, which I think is kind of nice.
so in the case of one of our apps receives alerts or shark sightings, but if the user never taps on it, our app never knows about it.
Yeah,
I mean, it's something, the default is that banner eventually goes away on its own,
yeah,
which is really unfortunate because the people who have our app probably want to know about a shark alert.
right.
And there's no way for us to say this alert needs to persist.
But they can dial up, I mean,
They-
the OS gives you control of,
They need to change it such that it does not disspecify itself and knows that user has to specify, but they have to know to do that.
Oh, what do you mean? Like, if your app is not running, that
No,
you're...
in the notifications for your app, three choices, and are alert, and one of them persists until the user acts on it.
Oh,
The old style.
Yeah,
Like
the
iOS.
other
Like a-
two
like a
goes away
whoop?
after a period of time.
yeah,
Yeah, you can just turn those on.
Yeah, but the user has
Yourself.
to turn them on.
Yeah.
The app
right.
does.
Oh, you can still do that?
The user can.
Oh, wow.
I don't even know what they look like, because I haven't turned them on since they went away in iOS 3 or 4. Is it like a thing with a button?
There's like, there are like three little icon buttons, and each one sort of shows you what that
Oh, yeah,
kind of
right.
alert looks like.
They just kind of persist on the top of your screen. Yeah.
That's
If
pretty
you-
wild.
If you turn that option to that, if you turn that option,
There-
as I say,
Yeah.
the user needs to know that you-
There is a category that you probably would not be eligible for, but I think it was in iOS 12, they introduced something called critical alert kind of thing. I have the actual like string in the talk later, but that will bypass the locks, like the mute switch, and like it'll make a noise all the time, even if the user's at the Opera. But for a Shark Alert app, that might actually be appropriate. So once you've kind of got your whole setup, you basically have to decide what you're going to say, and so this is about what you're saying and what options you have to say it. And that's this content object, this notification content object. So it's incredibly straightforward. You just create a content object, give it a title, a body, and then you'll get basically a vanilla alert, or notification, I guess I should say. And you have the option of a subtitle in this new world. And I swiped this off of a WWDC session, so you can see the different pieces of it. If you omit the subtitle, it'll just go up here. It's pretty basic. And something that came up yesterday, you can actually, if you wanted to set an image, I don't have anything in the slides about this, but there's an API where basically you give them a URL that references binary data within your app. So this is the way you would normally localize stuff, obviously, within your app. Apple actually, in the docs, they discourage you from using this. So this is the API that they have. Does anybody have a guess, except for Mike, because I said this yesterday also, of why they have this API?
Currently, you can have per app languages. I don't know why else you might do that.
Sure, but you can have per app languages with the above one too, with the macro.
That is, if a user has a language set for your app, they might not want notifications in that language outside of that app. I don't know. It's obviously not the answer. But
Yeah. I feel you.
Is it keychain related?
It is not keychain related.
What was the question?
Why not just use the normal API that you would use to localize a string with
Okay.
with a notification?
Can you send down? Wait, we're talking local notifications?
Mm-hmm.
I have no more words.
because of the arguments, could be a function.
Nope, you can put arguments in there's an API for that too.
Is it for sensitive information?
Sorry? Nope.
For sensitive information.
That the localization may change.
Yes. Exactly. So basically the idea is when you use that top version, it reaches into your like localized strings bundle or whatever your localized strings files, pulls out whatever the right value is, and returns that as a string. So then when it caches that version, and then later, like a year later potentially, it'll issue that. This actually like creates the string at the time when it fires. It'll reach into your bundle and into your app and grab the correct value. So if the user changes their language, like let's say, I don't think this is worth doing, but that's just me. Like you could imagine a situation where like a user in India buys a phone and they don't know how to change the language, and they'd install your app, or their like nephew installs your app on their phone, and then later that same nephew like figures out how to change the language to whatever their actual language is, but you had already scheduled the notification, like it won't be in the right language for the user. Yeah.
Can't read it how can you schedule a notification?
Sorry?
You can't read it, how can you schedule a notification?
Well, they didn't schedule it. You did. So you know what I mean? Like they open up your app that's like perfect app for them, but
You can painstakingly do it while translating every single word in the thing and figure it out later.
Yep.
It's also because you can schedule the notification for well into the distant future.
Yes.
Your app may get updated. You may end up with new values for the same key. Even in
Oh,
the
that's
same language.
interesting.
So it might be another thing. Where it might be a more relevant.
You should write a
Use your
migration
keys
index.
carefully.
I've never done any of
Very
this. I'm just
sneaky. That's
guessing.
good.
And
I like
when
it.
you delete it.
Don't
Yeah.
use keys.
I wonder if it stores the value at that time in case it's missing
Well,
later.
Oh,
Normalized
interesting.
localized string behavior is just to use the key if the string isn't in the table,
Yep.
but like a lot of people use dot-in strings or
Or you could have just like a key, like a arbitrary.
yeah, but what
Key.
if the string is deleted from the table when the notification eventually fires because the app has been updated?
Then your user would see like a UUID instead of like whatever. Yeah.
Well, I don't know, it could at the
Oh,
time
it
that
could
this
look
is
it
set up, it could look it up at that time, store that alongside the key
Yeah.
in case it's missing in a future bundle.
That would be an easy demo to do that I will not do, but you could figure it out for sure. Anyone else?
A lot of people actually take advantage of this. I just tried to change my language on my phone, and it's like the only notifications I could see that actually exhibit this behavior are like the Apple ones.
Oh shit! So it actually changed this value of the strings in Notification Center
Like
after they had already fired.
Yeah.
What?
Wow.
like it does change the language.
Mind blown.
Wow.
That's even
pretty
cooler than I
neat,
thought.
yeah.
So that's interesting. That kind of hints at like what the actual like store is. They don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The implementation is really just storing the key.
Yes, and like when
And
they
waiting
are.
us to redraw it.
Yeah, I had kind of like had a mental model of like they had like one place where they put the pending notifications, and then when they fired, like they kind of like put something else there. But that's pretty cool. Thank you for doing that. That's awesome.
But nobody's really implementing this. So that's
Yeah. My feeling was like there was like a bug that was filed or something, and then when the team fixed it, they made sure to make the docs all say like, "Do not use the regular one version thing." But I don't know. That's awesome. I can't believe that they actually update what's already done.
Apple takes advantage of it. Nobody else does.
That's cool. Oh, yeah.
I'm wondering if they give you a chance to reevaluate arguments.
They do. Okay, the next thing is you basically there's a version that you can have a template string and it'll go in. So
Yeah. No, I'm just wondering, like, so you change locales, and then you change localization, and then possibly like currency or something.
sure.
You get a hook for reevaluating 5.
I don't think so. Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, that's interesting. I don't think so. Because once you basically you're gonna it's in like a couple slides, but once you like give that request to the like the notification center, like it's gone. Like you can get a list of the pending requests and you can ask it about it, but you don't get a delegate message that's like locale change. Do you want to change your mind? But yeah, so that's a good point. It probably wouldn't work as well. You can set badges. So if you set the badge to a positive integer, it'll make your badge on your phone change to that on your icon, app icon, to a point. I don't know what the number is now. Is it 999 or is there? Does anybody know?
Oh, the maximum.
Yeah.
I've seen
Well,
people
it's
with
more-
mail notifications in the tens of thousands.
Oh, really? So there is no max.
I think it's
I'm sure there's a max. But
It's very, very
I think
high.
We'll hold 5 digits,
Okay.
but there are some combinations of digits that will overflow.
Probably
Mm.
not.
I remember somebody doing some tricks. The guy who tracked the steps early on, underscore David Smith.
That's not familiar.
Yeah, that
He did a
he
blog post.
yeah, a number of years ago that he realized that if he had the string, it's variable with string, and over some width it would truncate.
Oh,
somewhere.
interesting.
And
Does it
so
go in the
he-
middle or does it go in the?
I don't remember. I think it was in the middle. But so what he would do is he figured out where it would, under what circumstances it would truncate, and sometimes he would substitute a number. He would display false information that was pretty close to the real, because he's talking about tens of
He
thousands of
puts in
steps.
ones. He puts
Yeah,
like
he
11
would
on
put
the end
he would
of
put a
it.
1 instead of an 8
Oh, interesting.
somewhere towards the least common denominator.
That's cool.
The least important side of it. And I was coming down thinking math.
Well, if it
but
is
yeah.
a UI label
Yeah.
on Springboard
Yeah,
or whatever,
yeah.
then
I
like
think
that,
that's what it is.
yeah, that's interesting. That's cool. So if you set a positive integer up to whatever, it'll display that. If you set it to 0, it'll clear the badge, and if you don't set it at all, I put equals nil, but just as a placeholder to like not touch it. But I think if you set it to nil, it won't. It will not do anything. So
Isn't there one law to increment what the badge currently is?
I believe. Ooh, I don't know.
We used to,
Really, I don't know. What do you think it would be?
I don't remember offhand how you do it, but I know it is done.
I have a Oh, does anybody have like a playground open? They can go into the docs. No, because this isn't actually tied to your app yet. It's just like a notification content object.
What's the type that we're looking for?
Sorry, it's UN notification content, I believe. Yeah, UN notification content.
And we're looking at badge,
Yeah.
which is an NS number.
Yes. You have to watch this again.
I don't, that,
Is there nothing in the header?
I'm just on the website.
Oh, okay.
The badge property docs don't say anything about increment. They just say when the value in the property is nil, the system leaves the current badge unchanged.
Yeah. It seems like increment would be a nice feature to have, but again, like you
Push notifications, I know it works.
there is. Oh, interesting. I don't know the answer to that, but maybe it exists.
You won't know what number the badge already is, so you can't set the badge.
That's right.
So there has to be an increment or debt.
Well, you can say explicitly you want to do something.
I think it depends if you have like domain knowledge about what you're like pushing. You know what I mean? Like if whatever the thing
If it's
is.
mail, then you can say how many are unread.
Yes.
But if it's like shark attacks, then you should be able to-
But you should like yeah. It seems like there should be like something you could write in your app where you would be able to provide that information to whatever object is scheduling.
We don't actually do this, but it could be like how many alerts have there been since you last responded to them.
Yeah, but you could architect a solution where you're since you last responded. Yeah. Well, you could do that. You could.
You know, 5 new alerts.
Yeah. Well, you could have some kind of. I mean, I don't need to like solve it now, but like it seems like you could have a world where you just use some lightweight way to keep track of the number of scheduled alerts, and on foreground, you clear
I'm
it.
saying
Yeah.
Currently, there is, I forget exactly what the interface is, you can specify, I want the badge number to go off by this amount.
Gotcha.
This
Isn't
is
there?
push notifications.
Is there not a method? Oh, I see. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I'll bet it exists, but I don't know what it is. If somebody can find it, that'd be cool. Sounds. There's. You can set it to default to just get the whatever it is now. It's like blah blah blah. Or you can reference a file in your bundle. It's got to be a short file, and I think it does have to be an A file, and I think it does have to be an A file with 2 Fs. But I could be wrong about that. And this is what I was talking about before. There's this new thing, I believe this is in iOS 12, where if you have a legitimate use case to... Sorry?
I was just reading this.
Oh,
special
yeah,
title
yeah,
that
yeah.
we need, yeah.
So you need to have an entitlement, and I think they're pretty strict about it. I don't have any experience with it, but so if you have, I think the example they use in the talk is like a glucose monitor or something of that nature. Shark attack, I think, would probably qualify.
Alerts, not attack. I'm trying to avoid.
We're trying to prevent attacks, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
I feel like there's a case to be made that you guys could have a critical alert.
I would think so.
Being attacked by shark.
Yeah.
It's kind of like what
Shark with.
I would definitely want an alert on my phone if I was currently being attacked by
If I'm being attacked by a shark, I think just like I think let it be, man. Like I don't know.
You wouldn't answer your phone.
No, maybe
Yeah,
like
we need the Apple Watch to automatically detect when you were being attacked by a shark, so that it can notify whoever authorities.
maybe that's one of the next ones they need to add. You have like swimming, running, being attacked by a
Oh,
shark.
it's like fall detection.
Yeah, exactly.
Shark
You notify your next of kin very quickly.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like it's just like I can have it ring my wife's phone if I'm like being attacked by a shark. Yeah. Oh God. Do you know how many? So, if of people who are attacked by a shark, what percentage survive?
There have been like an average of less than a dozen fatal attacks in the world
Ever?
each year.
Oh, each year.
Each year.
Okay.
It's like under 10.
You got to work at it.
Well,
Work at getting dead or
it's
work
getting
at-
easier.
Work at getting it.
Oh, work at.
You got to put yourself in.
You know, mostly it's like a scrape or a nibble.
Okay.
Because generally the shark doesn't want to eat you, it thinks you're a seal. So it's figured out, no, you're not.
You're not a seal, then it's
They
cool.
generally don't like it.
They just don't like suntan lotion.
Yeah, not clear, not clear why, no one's ever asked that.
And then this is a holdover from before, and it's very useful. You can put arbitrary info into your content object, and then you'll get it back later in the delegate method. So here's your whole notification content object. It's got a bunch of stuff in it. What do you do with it now? You have to decide when it's going to fire. So you use a notification trigger. And I just put together a few different use cases to illustrate these. So if you imagine that right now the time is like whatever, 8 o'clock, a user is using an app right now, you might try to issue notification at the same time the next day. So you have like a super basic trigger. It's called a time interval notification trigger. And you just give it a NS time interval or a double. So in this case, it's like almost the next day, 23 and a half hours, which I really like Duolingo a lot. I think they're really, really smart about a lot of the things that they have. And this I picked up from one of their talks was one of the things, of all of their testing, the most impactful reminder that they could issue was always like 23 and a half hours later. And you create one of these triggers, very, very simple. Well, if you cared about that, you could use what's on the next slide. So yes, you could also do something that was tomorrow. This one basically operates on date components. So you this was a new method for me. There's a method on calendar called next weekend. Does everybody know about this? Pretty rad. So anyway, you can get next weekend, which gives you a date range, and then you can grab the start of that. Grab next weekend, set the hour to whatever you want, and then now you have an event. You basically create a count. It's called a calendar notification trigger. You give it those date components, and it'll find the next date after that, matching those components. So now this trigger would represent 8 a.m. On Saturday, this coming Saturday. And then this is a location trigger. Location notification trigger takes a CL region object. So I gave this talk yesterday across town in Boston. That happens to be there. Pretty simple. And then I was thinking like, oh, what's some cool stuff you can do based on the stuff that you know about the user based on their phone. So for example, your current locale has a region code that gives you the country that the user is in. If you wanted to send a notification on Thanksgiving, you could check if they're in the US or Canada. In Canada, they celebrate Thanksgiving on the second Monday in October. In the US, they celebrate on the third Thursday of October. Actually, that's a typo. It's the fourth Thursday. The code is right. The comment is wrong, which is usually the way it is. This is another one I didn't know about. On NSLocale, you have uses metric system, which is pretty rad. So you could change your content of your message based on which unit of measurement the user uses. It's pretty rad. I mean, I feel like stuff like this probably wouldn't be on your server for the user, or you would have to like write some custom code about it. So it's kind of nice that you can do this kind of stuff. I ran out of slides that worked with the talk, but so this is the request object. And to try to salvage it, we already talked about the content and the trigger. So what are you saying? When is it being presented to the user? Under what circumstances? And then you bundle that up into a request object. And the request object takes an arbitrary identifier that's a string. You give it your identifier, your content, your trigger, and then you add it to your notification center. The identifier is actually pretty cool because this was such a delightful little piece of design. If you submit requests, multiple requests with the same identifier, each one will overwrite the previous one. So if you are, like for example, actually I'll not say anything because I think I have, there we go. So if you imagine that you had a hot dog stand and you were issuing a notification and you had like an order number that was tied to the notification and you made a guess about when the hot dog was going to be ready and some time went by and then you learned more about when the hot dog was going to be ready. You could just use the same identifier, issue a new request, and it'll update that notification, which is pretty cool. And I believe this actually will also update any delivered notifications as well. So even if it's already in the user's notification center, it'll change the message, which is pretty cool. This is something I'm doing in one of my apps that's going to ship soon, basically for content. It's like the gross marketing term is drip content, but just like content that like deepens a user's experience, gives them, lets them kind of pick up stuff that they had left off. You can use a standing set of identifiers, and on background you could schedule a bunch of notifications to fire at certain time intervals, and they'll override each other as they go. Oh, I walked through it, but you don't really need to. And then just some stuff about cleaning up. You have, there's an API to get anything that's pending that hasn't been delivered yet, and you can do stuff with that. Or you can, once you've got those IDs of the requests that are pending, you can remove them so they won't get delivered. I don't think this is any different than what I had before. Sorry. Or you can also like remove delivered notifications that are actually already in the user's notification center. So if it's no longer relevant, you can just take it away and they'll disappear. And you could remove them all. So for example, on foregrounding, you could say like, the user doesn't need to see anything that was in there before. And then lastly, you can, this is just how you talk about when you get those pretty little buttons that do stuff, like the snooze button, which is really the one that I use. So this is a combination of these things, these categories and these actions. So first you set up a bunch of actions that can do stuff. They take an identifier. That's a shitty identifier, but whatever. A title, which is what the user actually sees, and then some options. In this case, that means that when the user taps that option, it would actually foreground your app. With no options, I believe it would it's like the snooze button. It doesn't actually foreground your app, but your app would get a message. And destructive would, it changes the display of the actual option that's sent to the user. And you can combine these. So you give it an identifier, which is a string, and you'll use that string later. Oh, well, I'll tell you in a second. But once you actually have this category, you register it with the system. This is the only piece of API that I don't really love about this framework. I don't love that it's like one call to like set all of the notification categories. I would much rather it was like set category for key, something like that, where you could have independent pieces of your app be able to interact with it differently. And this way, you have to basically know one thing has to know how everything works, which I don't love, but. So here's the same kind of thing we had before. So all you do to make it interactive is you reference the category that you registered before by ID. Oh yeah, I do. Yeah, it would. That's just that's supposed to be body. Nice catch. And then in your app, you would register some object of yours to be the delegate of the notification center, and you get this message. You get the action that the user took, and there's some default actions that you can expect. There's the default action, which means the user tapped on the notification itself. There's the dismiss action, which I actually didn't double check this. Is that if the user goes like whoop, is that what happens? Does anybody know? I actually don't know when this gets fired. When you say clear, maybe. Yeah, you might be right. I'm not totally certain about that. A responsible presenter would have looked that up. I just love messing around with the Keynote stuff. And then whatever it is that you set before. So that was in those actions when you set like an identifier, like remember eat, throw away, whatever. And then based on what that action is, you can do different stuff. And then they give you a completion handler you're supposed to call when you've finished processing whatever you were supposed to do. And then you have access to the notification content that you gave it before. This time it's an immutable object, but you have access to all the stuff that you set prior. The user info object obviously being a very useful way to do whatever it is that your app is supposed to do. And that's it. Any questions? Yeah.
Can you set vibration?
Can you set what?
Vibration.
Object.
Oh, I don't know. I don't think so. That would be cool. That would be useful for you. I remember a few times ago you wanted to do like an app that would do that.
That might be something the user sets for notifications in general, but not your app specifically.
Yeah. Although you can set a sound, so it almost seems like it's not. It's just like there's not a strong reason why the user can't actually set it.
Oftentimes the choice is either to have a sound or silently vibrate. And again, that's what the user options in the system.
Gotcha.
typically offer.
There are some apps with their own like patterns or whatever for vibration.
Oh, really? Oh, I don't know. Maybe that
Twitter,
API.
Snap, they have different ones.
Sorry?
Snapchat and Twitter, I know, are two different. They have two different.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Do we know anybody that works at Twitter?
There was one that could actually
iOS 13 has stuff for custom haptics, but I don't know if that exists in the for notifications or not.
Gotcha. So you can trigger custom haptics from your app somehow? Do you know the API for that?
I don't remember that being one of my problems. I remember thinking that I could get the haptics I wanted. I just couldn't get it to stay aware of the time.
Oh, I see.
Come back when it would set notifications that would actually follow through the day. Like it wouldn't let me continue passing notifications along. But I do remember, if I'm remembering it right, I remember being able to get it to buzz and buzz interesting.
Oh, cool. I'm not familiar with that. I haven't done any haptic stuff.
I think it was stuff like you buzz once or like a double buzz, but then you send multiple ones.
That's cool. I know that there's, I mean, this is like way back, like 10 years ago. I remember using an API that was like, it was like a special kind of sound basically that you would play. Does anybody remember this?
You can do that on 13 as well, right? You play a sound as a haptic.
Gotcha. Yep.
I don't know if that's old one.
It's the core haptics API.
Oh,
It's a
okay.
new framework.
I gotcha. This is not what I was using. There was like there was like, you had to know like the right, I think it was like a string that you would send to the framework and it would be not a sound. It would be not audio. It would be like a sound. It would, that's how you buzz your phone. But anyway. Cool. Thanks, guys. See you at Hamburgers.